When you look out to the horizon, what do you see? What does tomorrow look like? If you run a family-owned business, you see the future differently. As part of the fourth generation of my family to help lead First Bank, I know we see the future like you. At the First Bank Center for Family-Owned Businesses, your vision is ours. Now, let our experience be yours. In this seminar, let us help you see what your future can be.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of the Center for Family-Owned Business webinar for First Bank. Thank you for joining us. We're grateful for your time and for your attention on this, what we believe is a very important topic. Over the last few months, we've had a lot of conversations with family businesses everywhere around the country. And one of the topics that continues to come up that has really taken an impact or had a big impact over the last couple of years is this topic of company culture. Obviously, the way we ran our organizations prior to COVID and the way we run them today is probably very similar, but the culture in our organizations has taken a pretty big hit for a lot of reasons. We addressed some of those last month when we had Donna Brighton of Brighton Leadership speak to us on our webinar. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper today with Dr. Allie Taylor from Orange Kiwi Consulting. Allie and I have been friends for a long time. We've partnered on many different programs with various family businesses. Some of them might be you. And we're just grateful for Allie to take the time today to present to us this really important discussion on the topic of culture. Part 3 of this series will take place after the holidays in January, where Donna and Allie and I will come back together and talk further about how we can further navigate the family dynamics while driving for results, as you can see on our screen. In December, we will be publishing various excerpts from the Women in Family Business Leadership event that we did in September. We'll be posting those on our website at first.bank/family business. But for now, I'd love to introduce you again. For those who have not had the opportunity to meet Dr. Allie Taylor yet, you're in for a treat. And for those of you who already know her, well, you're also in for a treat. So Allie, we're grateful for you to be here with us today, and we appreciate your time and taking us through this journey on this discussion about company culture and a family business. So it's all yours, my friend.
Thanks, Ed. I appreciate the intro. And this topic is definitely close to home, as we have 2 family businesses in our family that are thankfully going very well. We have a great culture and we're intentional about curating it. But I personally lived through a family business that did not have a great culture. And that culture was the fruit of a marriage that grew toxic and a family system that was deeply unhealthy. Both the marriage and the family business imploded. My passion today is to make sure that other family businesses avoid that fate whenever possible. And so when we think about it, what is a family? What is a family system? And what are they biologically designed for? So family systems are biologically designed for the protection of their members, for maintaining the status quo, and a core protective strategy that evolved over the course of human evolution. And the strategy is based on the belief that we have been successful because of the way we behaved and what we valued in the past. And to be successful in the future, we must keep doing these things. That makes changing a family system inherently difficult, but not impossible. So in part 2, what we're going to focus on is understanding how family system dynamics shape org culture, discovering the unique attributes of enterprising families that shape their family system, and gaining insights for how to navigate the intersection of organizational culture and the family system. But first, a bit of housekeeping. When you see the word question on a slide, this is your cue to participate. And we'll use the chat feature to gather your responses and your feedback. You can also use that feature to ask questions as we go, and Ed will curate those questions for the end. Let's give it a try. What is the purpose of the brain? Go ahead and use your chat feature. Yep, I see things like life preservation, regulation of the body. It's where we get our communication and language. It's where we get our feelings and our thoughts and our emotions. Oh, I like that one. The brain is our CPU. That's really true. And that CPU gets programmed through both nature and genetics and nurture, our experiences and the environment. Our brains have an extensive amount of programming based on the context of our early caregivers. From a genetics perspective or a nature perspective, that's what we inherit biologically from our parents. From a nurture perspective, that's the experiences that we have and the way that we get our needs met through our reactions with close caregivers, usually our parents and siblings. And our brains react biochemically to the emotions of those around us long before we can ever communicate verbally. Fast forward from a psychological perspective, as we enter young adulthood, all this programming is still there. And this is a time when our primary purpose of development is to separate from our family through a process of differentiation, to form our own unique self-identity and find new ways of getting our emotions met. So how does this relate to culture? Well, if you recall from part 1 with Donna Brighton, a global expert in culture and change, she summed it up this way. She said, culture in an organization is how work gets done, but that simple statement is inherently complex. She reminded us that culture is both caught and taught like all human behavior, and organizational culture defines what we pay attention to, what things mean, what actions to take when, and how we react emotionally, what's acceptable in that organizational culture. Donna's breathing exercise reminded us that breathing will happen whether we think about it or not. When we're mindful, we have the opportunity to control our breath. And she says the same way with organizational culture. And then leveraging your organizational culture to accelerate results means getting everyone moving in the same direction. And if people were represented by arrows, all the arrows would point the same way. Donna emphasized that culture is about how we react emotionally. And if you missed Donna, you can find her on First Bank's website, and I highly recommend you go visit that for more information. These powerful insights, particularly in the context of family business, continue to tie back to emotion and the family system. And therein lies the connection. Since our parents and siblings are fundamental to shaping our ways of being and doing in the world, everyone takes their family to work with them, no matter what kind of business they work for. So what's different about culture and family business? First, let's talk about what's the same. Organizational culture is shaped by those at the top, those with the greatest power, authority, control, and influence, or PACE. And organizational culture in a non-family business is shaped by people coming from different family backgrounds. The org culture is a blending of different experiences. An org culture in a family business is shaped by a single family system, or in the case of a partnership, a limited number of family systems. And the perspectives of those at the top, those with the greatest PACE, are the ones that dominate the culture. Those same perspectives are held by people who, in a family business, grow up together. And so the perspectives of who we are and what we're capable of are shaped by lifelong experience rather than new appraisal as a young adult. And those in power, our family members, often see us incompletely or subjectively. And the familiarity that is there can either take the edge off of admiration or mistakenly exaggerate the level of admiration beyond what we would experience elsewhere. And there's no judgment in these statements. They're neither good nor bad. They simply are in a family business. And the reality is that family business brings both opportunities and obstacles that we wouldn't have elsewhere. Brings profit and pain that we wouldn't have elsewhere. It brings safety and scars that we wouldn't have elsewhere. And going back to Donna's point, culture defines 4 behaviors: what we pay attention to, what things mean, what actions to take when, what emotional reaction we can display. From a family system perspective, these 4 behaviors are deeply tied to how we experienced emotion and attachment in our family. We're a product of the emotional structures in our family system. It's PACE, or power, authority, control, and influence behaviors, and the extent to which we were given agency to differentiate from our family, which is a really important developmental step. Differentiation is the active process of defining the self, revealing the self, clarifying our boundaries, being able to set boundaries, and managing the anxiety that comes from risking either greater intimacy or potential separation. That threat is significantly heightened in family businesses. And differentiation is important for having a solid sense of who we are. The ability to seek to understand rather than just agree. The ability to self-validate and self-soothe. And the ability to tolerate short-term pain for long-term growth. Those with underdeveloped self-differentiation or self-identity depend so heavily on the acceptance and approval of others that they become emotional chameleons to gain approval. Or they're dogmatic about trying to force other people and pressuring other people to conform. They literally cannot tolerate being different from others. In non-family business, culture is shaped by many people who have tried to resolve these issues in healthy ways and unhealthy ways, but they all come together and they have forces that start to work these things out together. And the primary motivation is maximizing shareholder value. In a family business, that's not the case. In a non-family business, if you fail, those who fail to deliver are readily replaced and forgotten over a short period of time. For family businesses, the behaviors and emotions of the family system are reflected and often magnified in the culture, and its primary driver is not always shareholder value. It's often preservation of family cohesiveness, or what's called socio-emotional wealth, the intangible value we get from the business at an emotional level and a relational level. And when family members fail to deliver in a business, even if they're removed from their role, they remain part of the family. And so we have to resolve this anxiety. Practically speaking, the biggest difference about culture is that changing culture in a family business starts by changing the family system. And that is not easy. So let's try out your skill at using chat for feedback. What is a family system? Okay, there's some good insights in there. It's a group of people who share similar DNA. It's a group of people that have a bond. It's your parents, your siblings. It's the way different parts of the family work together. Ooh, I like that. The way different parts of the family work together. From a psychological or family systems perspective, from a theoretical perspective, it's a complex, dynamic, living structure and an emotional unit that fundamentally shapes our values, beliefs, feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. One of the earliest theorists on family systems is Dr. Murray Bowen, who was a psychiatrist and founder of the theory. And what he said is that our emotional system evolved over several billion years. And it's our emotions that govern and drive relational systems. So while people have language, complex psychology, the ability to think and rationalize, we still demonstrate behaviors that are similar to other forms of life. And one similarity, whether we like it or not, is that our emotional selves affect most of our human activity. And that's true even for those of us who prefer to think than feel. I'm in that camp. Feelings are powerful tools. One of my favorite Bowen quotes is when he says, the emotional system is the principal driving force in the development of clinical problems. Knowledge of how the emotional system operates in one's family, work, and social systems offers new, more effective ways of solving problems in each of these areas. That was, to me, a crystallizing moment when I started to understand that even this early programming is open for change. And so even when we're physically or emotionally disconnected from our families, a profound different interdependence exists. Our self-identity is derived from the interaction of genetics and learned behaviors. The ways of being and doing in a family system shape lifelong patterns. And much like Donna's breathing exercise, these patterns will happen, even those we don't like. Changing our patterns takes tremendous self-awareness, reflection, and intentionality. In fact, researchers found that family patterns repeat over generations, even when family members didn't grow up together, as in the case of adoption. And so what other patterns do we see in family businesses that give us a clue to be able to begin to understand so that we can approach change? One of the things is personality attributes. And it's interesting because they consistently show up in businesses or entrepreneurial families that are very successful. We could spend an entire session on this topic, but the takeaway is that these 5 traits: a risk-taking propensity. That's not just taking any risk, but risks people believe that they can control. A need for goal achievement. A very high ability to be innovative or creative, seeing things that other people miss, having just-in-time solutions. Tolerance for ambiguity. Every time you hit a new level of success, it's a new round of ambiguity. And a need for control. These 5 things are present in families that are entrepreneurially successful. And they shape some of the behaviors in the family. In addition to these attributes and associated behaviors, we also find certain mental health patterns in families. For example, we talk about the lifetime prevalence of mental health issues in successful entrepreneurs or entrepreneurial families. And what the research tells us, a great study came out in 2018 out of UC Berkeley by Freeman et al., is that depression is 2 times as prevalent, ADHD is 6 times higher, addiction is 3 times higher, bipolar is 11 times higher. And the one thing that is very similar and on the rise in entrepreneurial families and non-entrepreneurial families is the rate of anxiety. And that study was prior to the pandemic. But it harkens back to a really important insight by Dr. Bowen. And this was decades ago. His whole belief was that our personal and relationship problems are coming from exaggerated responses to sensing a threat to family harmony and that of other groups. For example, the reaction to a family disagreement can be such an inflated pull for unity that there's no tolerance for differences to emerge. Or an upset child is so upset that we do everything we can to fix it for them, and consequently there's no room for the development of their own capacity to soothe themselves. And Bowen's belief was that this was causing man to move increasingly into a crisis. And we see that today in family businesses, where they'll move between these places of artificial harmony, where they just sweep everything under the carpet and pretend like it's okay, to mean-spirited attacks when it erupts like a champagne bottle. That's happening in the best of families. And when we think about it, it's mirroring what's happening in society. Today, what we know is the only constant is change. Actually, we've known that for millennia, going all the way back to Heraclitus, a Greek philosopher. More recent researchers, and a world-renowned futurist, Michael Simmons, highlights this pace of life over time as rapidly accelerating. And this evidence is exactly what Bowen was talking about. Our world is trending toward an increasing rate, and the type of change required to compete is so much more complex. Beyond the issues of the pandemic, we're facing massive societal, technological, environmental, and regulatory changes on a global scale. Simmons says that by 2040, we'll experience a year of change by today's standards in 3 months. By 2080, people will experience a year of change in 11 days. The warning signs are everywhere that the status quo isn't going to work. The way we've always been and done isn't going to work in the future. And other studies are showing us that family businesses recognize that there is a need for moderate to significant change and that it will only increase. Yet the readiness for change among family members and their enterprises is not keeping pace. And this is both a family system and an organizational culture issue. The family businesses are often underprepared because of these family systems issues, the emotional nature of it, to find a way to pivot and thrive. That's one of the reasons that we're partnering with Rodrigo Maz at the University of California, Irvine, to lead a global study in partnership with other universities, the Center for Family Business at First Bank, and other international organizations to help us better understand the impact of this rate of change on the future of family business so that we can close the gap and help them be more prepared. And so here we go, another question. What do you believe is the greatest obstacle to closing the need readiness gap in your family business? Great. Oh, I see some really interesting things coming in. Not knowing how. People being in power, the same power seats too long. Not having good governance. Because we're successful. Those are great points. We're going to see more of this and how it compares to the global research. And so thank you for providing that feedback, and look for our link to the study coming soon. For now, let's look at some practices that enduring families engage in. Let's see if we can get some clues here. First, the family is the key to everything. Enterprising families through the ages have demonstrated tremendous resilience. And while many companies have come and gone, there are some that persist against tremendous odds. These enterprising families do things differently. The Frescobaldi family is one example. They're an 800-year-old family business that originated in Florence, Italy, as explorers and politicians and scholars and bankers. And their family history, their archives actually contain notes for loans from King Henry VIII. But they're not bankers anymore. Today, they're one of the world's most influential wine families. And I have the privilege of exploring what 30th generation CEO Lamberto Frescobaldi considered the secret of the family's success. His response was that you don't sit on what you received, you create more than what you were given. Be responsible for capital and set goals. Don't act impulsively. And we talked over dinner about what that means for family member behaviors and why good governance is important, but it's not enough. Here are 5 things that can be done. One is keep the stories of the ancestors alive, including the lessons of failure and trauma. Intentionally cultivate family values that foster effective stewardship of the family and the business. Create space for fostering family relationships that are separate from the business. Establish clear rules for the family members that want to enter the business. And separate governance and operational management decision-making. All of these behaviors have underlying values for preservation of the family while allowing adaptability, change, and self-differentiation. So where does change begin? If we're not there today, if your family business culture isn't there, what's the first thing you can do? Carl Jung, another famous psychiatrist, is what he became famous for was developing measurable archetypes as a means of making the unconscious conscious. Because what he said is, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will drive your life and you will call it fate. And that's one of the other things that I was impressed about in the conversation with Umberto. He said, we've been courageous as a family about understanding what made us who we are, what makes us who we are, and what will make us who we are. When I think back to Bowen, another quote immediately came to mind, and that's when he says, the knowledge of how the emotional system operates in one's family, work, and societal systems offers new, more effective options for solving problems in each of these areas. Emotions and associated behaviors are the key to culture. Families that persist are intentional. They measure, they adjust, and adapt. They courageously choose to make the unconscious conscious. So how can we take steps to making the unconscious conscious, to getting greater clarity and confidence so that we can control more of our future than letting it just happen to us? Well, the first thing we can do is seek to objectively understand what is real for the family and the business today without judgment, blame, shame, or guilt, and acknowledge that it's going to be scary. It's going to be scary. There's going to be pain, but we can either choose the pain and go through the easy way, or we can try to run from the pain and it actually lasts longer and is harder to get through. By being courageous, you can measure what can be measured through organizational culture assessments. These are some of the tools that Donna talked about in part one. And then you can map what can be mapped, the family stories, the relational dynamics, the PACE or power, authority, control, and influence. And you can start to create clarity and embrace the reality. No judgment, no shame, no blame, no guilt. Just embrace what exists today, the good and the bad, the good and the things you don't want. And then you get to define a path forward intentionally and build upon the strengths of the family and the business. But that takes choice and courage. So my strong encouragement to you is to think about what we said at the beginning. Family systems are biologically designed for the protection of their members. Maintain the status quo is a core protective strategy that evolved over the course of evolution. But we have a chance to take control and change our future because we have this cognitive ability to make decisions, to choose, to look at the world objectively and decide what we want to do. And in the rapidly changing, volatile environment we're in, we can either wait for change to be forced upon us, or we can be the authors of our future. Donna talked about culture building as being a complex process of getting all the arrows moving in the same direction. Edgar Schein and Kurt Lewin, two research practitioners in the area of culture, have proven that the first step is the hardest. First, you have to unfreeze that status quo. And unfreezing happens accidentally through circumstances and events forced upon us, like the pandemic, changes in our marketplace, changes in the family system, like illness, death, divorce, financial challenges, or through foresight, by choice, when somebody in the family sees the inherent untapped potential and courageously starts the conversation. And admittedly, the complexity of culture change in the family business is magnified exponentially based on the number of family members actively involved. The business is often the glue that holds the family together and the source of tension. The dual nature brings profit and pain, obstacles and opportunities, success and scars. it often becomes a significant part of both the family and the self-identities. And that is a tremendous amount of emotional complexity. While change is never easy, it is both inevitable and accelerating. As family business owners, our challenge is to decide whether we want to be courageous and intentional curators of our culture and legacy, or if we're going to choose to respond reactively in moments of pressure. While being intentional is often less painful, there will be pain. Let's not lose sight of the fact, though, that the strength of the family is what pulled many businesses through the very painful pandemic, and many cultures remain unfrozen and open to change at the moment. So can we capitalize on the strengths before the culture goes back to the status quo? What do you need to let go of? And what do you need to hold on to as culture refreezes? How can we get prepared for the continuous change cycles we'll face? If you're not sure, join us in January for part 3. Don and I are going to join Ed for a Q&A session to be able to dive a bit deeper. And in the meantime, you'll be able to access the slides from this webinar with some of the tips. And you can check out some of the resources on our website. You can drop me an email or you can give us a call. And I'm grateful for your time. Maybe this is your first step, just listening to this webinar. Thank you very much.
Allie, thank you so much. This was fantastic. A word that you kept coming back to that I pay close attention to this word when I hear it, and I've heard it a lot, especially in the topic of culture, is that word intentional.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of organizations have had very unintentional and very accidental, if you will, culture shifts. What would you tell a company that knows that they need to make a shift, but either they don't have buy-in from the family or they think maybe we're too dysfunctional to do this? Let's just react. Reacting has worked well. Or what message have you given to other clients, or would you give to someone who might say, look, we've been hit hard. We're working from home. We've got this hybrid environment. We've got some people who are, there's just so much going on, and people, look at me. I'm in a suit and tie working at home. You're presenting to hundreds of family businesses from home. We wouldn't have envisioned this 3 years ago. What would you say about that unintentional culture shift that people are going through right now?
Well, first, if somebody's asking the question, I'd say they're already taking the right steps, because there's something in their environment that's causing them to want some type of change. So just pausing to just take a few minutes and brainstorm with a few people. If you can crystallize 2 or 3 people that start to see similar things, then you've got a place to start. You've got kind of a toehold, even though it won't be easy. And then once you start having that conversation, don't be afraid to measure it. No harm's going to come to you by measuring. What it's going to do is give you greater control.
Are there telltale signs other than that you're starting to talk about it, that you can see where a family can say, you know what, we're probably ready for some sort of a change?
Besides that they're talking about it, so I'd say there's probably a couple of points where besides the pandemic and something episodic like that, it's when there's a natural leadership transition. That's a prime time to think about change. Or if they're planning for succession, anytime you have a leadership change, your culture is going to change.
Sure.
So starting to think about how do we intentionally design that? Because remember, culture is driven by the people at the top. So generational succession will happen. We don't get a choice. The choice is, do we want to control it or do we want to react to it?
Sure.
So if they're trying to do either of those 2 things, that's a optimal time. But the best time to start is yesterday. The next best time to start is today.
It's the old planting a tree thing. 20 years ago was the best time. Now is the second best. I love that.
That's right.
Last question that I have, as we started talking with people over the last several weeks about this topic of culture, a question that's come to me a lot, and you and I have talked about it as well, is oftentimes the people who recognize the need for a culture shift in our organization are those that don't have the control over it.
Yeah.
What would you say to either an employee or a daughter or a son working for parents, or someone who isn't in that leadership role, that C-suite, if you will, quite yet? How can they influence culture in their organization when they don't really have the rubber stamp?
Even though you don't have the rubber stamp, it comes back to the fact that our culture is a product of our behavior and how we react emotionally. So just starting to create language for it, just trying to name it, just trying to talk about the values and the behaviors. What are they modeling? And so if I'm an employee in a business and I don't have positional authority, I might do it by championing the people who do report to me. And in my own small team, starting to create some inertia. And pretty soon, if you can create a constructive culture, you'll start to perform better. You'll outperform other areas, even if it's small and it's hard. And then start to promote that and describe why that's happening.
I like that. I have the visual, you know me well. I'm a very visual person. I picture that pebble dropping in the lake, the change happening here, and it's that ripple that goes out, and it's that ripple that eventually causes that change. So thank you for giving me that visual, and hopefully for those that had that question, that'll give them that same. Well, we appreciate you, Allie. As always, wonderful job today. We know many of you watching this webinar today didn't get a chance to watch it live. If you do have questions, please feel free to reach out. Allie's email is on the screen. Her contact information is on the screen, as well as her website and email address. You can contact us, myself, at ed.hart@fbol.com, or just visit the Center for Family-Owned Businesses website at first.bank/family business. This webinar, previous webinars, upcoming calendar, research articles, highlights of other family businesses, you'll find it all there. Most importantly, if you'd like to learn more about the bank or about how you can become a part of what we're doing here at the Center for Family-Owned Businesses, just reach out to me and we'll be happy to have that conversation. With that, join us again. As I mentioned at the beginning, lots of excerpts coming out in December for the Women in Family Business Leadership event that we hosted back in Irvine or Newport Beach last month. And then also the event that we have coming up on January 17th that Allie alluded to, where she and I and Donna will be having a conversation on company culture. We hope to have questions from all of you. And with that, again, Allie, thank you so much for your time. Thank you to all of you for your time today and for just being a part of our family. We treat you like family. We are a family-owned business as well, as you know, and we're just happy that you're part of our family as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
All right.